So for the past 8 or 9 months, I've been on a ketogenic carnivore diet, which basically means that I've had absolutely zero vegetables, zero carbs, zero plants whatsoever in the past 8 months. And I've been pretty much like vegetable free for almost a year now. I did the Paul Saladino like meat and fruit thing for a few months, but I didn't even like that, so I just went zero carb whatsoever. But anyways, I've had zero vegetables for about a year now, and I'm alive. Yes. Some people would think that I'd be dead by now, but truth is, I think you can survive without vegetables. But the reason why I'm making this video is because I just wanted to share why I eat absolutely zero vegetables, zero like plants in general. I just wanted to share with you why I don't eat those things. And even if you like vegetables, whatever, like, okay, that's fine. I just want to encourage some like self-experimentation and to maybe see like, maybe you don't actually need vegetables, because as a kid, I was always compelled to eat my greens and that sort of thing. And I don't think that's very helpful advice. I think there's specific cases where maybe you need vegetables, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But honestly, I don't believe that you need vegetables. If you like them, like I said, that's fine, that's cool. I just want to encourage some like self experimentation. Like I would encourage you to listen to my story and to listen to what I have to say, and then you can make your own decision on if you want to cut them out for a little bit or maybe double down on your greens or whatever. Like, that's completely up to you. I just want to encourage some self experimentation. But I think the best way I can start this off is just to tell you a story. So in 2023, I was really getting into like Hispanic culture, right? I was in Spanish 2, I think, from my high school class. I was getting into like speaking Spanish, learning about like Central and South American culture, that sort of thing. I was kind of getting into that food. I wasn't like zero carb by then or zero vegetable then, but I think this story is still relevant. I was getting really into that culture then, right? And so my school's Spanish club had this, I think it was a fiesta night for it was a fiesta night. And it's basically like a school dance kind of, but you'd like dance to Mexican music and whatnot. And I had just learned this like dance move. I remember that night I was enjoying the music and I learned a dance move from one of my one of my friends. I think it's called like the Huerpa or whatever. But I was moving and they were like, yeah, like I thought I was the shit that night, to be honest. And it was the next thing that I remember from that night is there was a jalapeno eating contest. So it was basically how many jalapenos could you eat? And so I was sat there with a bunch of other people, probably like 5 or 6 other people, and I think they recorded it, and I don't have the footage, so I won't show you, but I remember they were like 3, 2, 1, go, and everyone started eating their jalapeno. I was like, how do you eat this thing? And they were like, oh, just like eat it. And I was like, okay. So I bit it and I started chewing. I chewed it, and then I swallowed. And so if you don't know anything about jalapenos or just peppers in general, one, they're a nightshade, but two, jalapenos, while they are not the spiciest, they are spicy. Holy crap, dude. And especially in the seeds and like the white rinds of the jalapeno is where it's extremely spicy. That's where I think it's called capsaicin. I probably said that wrong, but that's where like this defense chemical that makes your tongue feel like it's burning is mostly stored. And I was chewing this thing, like breaking it up, and I swallowed it. It was in my digestive tract. And I remember about 30 seconds after I had swallowed this thing. So there was like basically just the stem left. And I looked at it. I was like, oh, that's not good. And I started getting this like awful feeling in my stomach. I was like, oh crap. I just fucked up big time. It was bad. And actually, I don't even think I swallowed. Like, looking back, I didn't swallow it, okay? I lied about that. I'm sorry. I was chewing it. I was just biting down on it. And I tried swallowing a little bit. But just the chewing and getting a little bit of that stuff in my throat and my stomach, I started, like, gagging. And, like, and my stomach was making these weird, like, gurgling sounds. And it was kind of like I was, like, throwing up. But nothing came out, really. It was, like, this, like these, like, dry gags almost. And I remember it was so spicy and my mouth was burning and mucus was like running down my face. I was like crying basically. My face was like all red. And I like ran over to the trash can and like I just like tried to like wipe out all the seeds out of my mouth. And like I did not handle that stuff well whatsoever. Some of those people eating the jalapenos, they were like they swallow like the whole thing and they're like absolutely stoic faced. Obviously I was not prepared. I was not prepared for that. And I think it's because they didn't like chew on the seeds or whatever. I chewed and I like got the capsaicin like up in my system. I remember like, and they brought over like a couple cartons of, you know, like the school milk, the sugary like weird milk or whatever. I normally didn't drink that stuff, but I was like dying. So I just kind of like was like like I need this stuff, dude. And so I was like trying to like rinse out my nostrils and my face for probably like 10 minutes. My body was just like it was revolting against me. It was awful. It was terrible, dude. And by the time all was said and done, I'd probably gone through like a couple water bottles and a couple like milk cartons, and my body was just like exhausted. And I just had this feeling of like, what the hell did I just do, dude? But all of that to say, that came from a plant defense chemical, a plant toxin. And that's one of the reasons why I don't eat vegetables anymore. I get a jalapeno technically isn't like a vegetable because I'm pretty sure vegetables are seedless things, but it's a great example of what plant defense chemicals can do to a person. And I lived most of my life not truly understanding what those things did to me. And now that I've cut them out completely, whenever I do introduce, like something slips in, like there's a little bit of spice or maybe there's some like garlic or whatever, I can truly feel those things like affecting my body. And what I've learned is that most plants have defense chemicals that basically tell you that you should not eat that. So like the bitter taste of spinach, the bitter taste of Brussels sprouts or asparagus, the bitter taste of any sort of food is telling you like this thing is poisonous, do not eat it. That's why it tastes bad. That's why whenever you try and feed some like green beans or something to a baby, they'll most likely spit it out because their brain is telling them like don't eat this stuff, but yet we force them to eat the freaking like the mush anyways. That's a side point, but I think you get what I'm saying is like this bitter stuff, there's a reason why it tastes bitter, right? Like there's a reason why things that smell bad to us are most of the time bad things. Like if you think about like dying stuff, right? The reason why that stuff smells bad is probably because it's not a good thing to be around. Like diseased, dead things, they smell bad because it's probably not a good thing to be around, right? That's why we like evolved, right, to smell these things as bad. right? To a vulture or to something that, like eats like the rotting dead stuff, they probably think that stuff's good, to be honest. Right? At least that's the way I think about it. Is like that stuff probably smells good to them, or the smell of it is like a good indicator for them. But for us, it's probably like, ooh, probably should stay away from that, right? And I think the same thing applies to whenever things generally taste bad. Fruit is a different thing because there isn't a ton of like stuff in that, but like that's a side point. This is about why I eat zero vegetables, not why I don't eat any fruit. So we'll talk about that afterwards. But basically, plant toxins, right? That's one of the reasons why I don't eat vegetables. That the jalapeno example is a little bit exaggerated because you don't go around eating like ultra spicy things all the time, but I think the reason why it's one of the biggest reasons why is because it's a toxin. I don't see a world where eating toxic stuff is good for you, even if you can handle it, right? Like I still survived. It didn't kill me, right? So obviously it wasn't that toxic. Otherwise I would have been dead, right? But do you think your life is better whenever you're constantly like if you're having those like reflexes unknowingly, even if it's in a smaller degree? Just think about that, right? Like the plant toxin might not be affecting you to a great degree, right? Like eating a pepper, a ghost pepper, right? Probably won't affect you that much, but it probably is on like a smaller degree. And do you want to deal with those downsides? I don't know. It's just something that I've thought through, and that whenever I experimented with it, I decided that I'd rather not have these things in my life. So yeah, I think a lot of people do over exaggerate the plant toxin thing though, because if you do prepare them in a certain way, like you cook the vegetables or you cook the beans or you remove the seeds, that sort of thing, then the plant toxin is not nearly as high, right? That's how you've like we as humans have prepared plants before by removing their seeds, by cooking them, by soaking them overnight. Those sorts of things we've done before to lower the toxic load so that we can enjoy those things, right? I don't personally do that. I think that's a lot of work, but I think it's over exaggerated by a lot of people. But if you do those things to remove the toxins, maybe you can have those things, right? But I think it's still important to consider them because, like I said, you can still have those reactions to them. You can still be reacting in some form to those plant toxins, even if it's minor. And you should still be mindful of plant toxins in general, because imagine one day that you don't cook your beans enough, and suddenly you're poisoned because you didn't cook your beans thoroughly enough. That's plant toxins. So just think about that. Like just consider it. I think it's over exaggerated by a lot of people who kind of preach like don't eat vegetables, eat carnivore diet, right? I think it's a little bit over exaggerated. For me personally, I don't have a ton of negative side effects, but I can still feel some of the negative side effects. If you know what I mean. It's like it's not crazy bad, but I can still see why people cut them out completely. And that's why I've cut them out completely. So yeah. Then the next thing that kind of plays onto this is, and I was talking about this earlier with the bitter taste. Most vegetables for me, they just taste like shit. They just taste bad. And I think that is partially because of the bitterness and the plant toxins in them, but also just like they just don't taste that good. Like they're just bland. There's no like real flavor in them. Like I personally don't. I remember a time where I would eat broccoli, but for me, the broccoli would have to be like really steamed. It'd have to be like soft so I could like chew it up really well. Otherwise, I'd be chewing and chewing and chewing and almost like gag just because it just would not break down because of the fiber, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But I just remember just like if the broccoli is like hard and chewy, so it's like, ugh, like because it's so bland, you get really no flavor out of it. There's nothing really tasty about it unless you add some like salt or you dip it in butter or something like that. Then it tastes real good because you add butter and salt to it. But it's just like this bland, nutritionless piece of garbage that I don't see why you would eat whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense to me as to why you would have any like they just don't taste good, dude. It just doesn't make any sense. And I get that's not a great argument against vegetables, but considering that I don't eat anything that's hyper stimulating or junk food wise, I think it's a valid argument because you could say like, oh, they just don't taste that good, and then you eat something that tastes good, but it's also like super unhealthy for you, like some, I don't know, some like candy or whatever. Then like, okay, this is probably not a good argument. But if you're making the argument from the stance of I don't eat anything else but meat, then like, okay, vegetables not tasting good from that baseline makes sense. At least the way I view it, right? Like, I don't think you'd be credible to say it if I was. I wouldn't be credible to say it if I was still eating junk food. I don't eat anything else but just like meat and eggs, dude. Like that's all I eat. So I think I'm from a position to say like most of the time the spices, the vegetables, they don't really taste that great. Like yeah, they can add a little bit of flavor here and there if they're prepared right, if they're the certain right kind. But most of the time they don't really add that much that you could get otherwise. Like the spiciness and whatnot, I get to a certain extent. I do kind of enjoy spice unless it's a jalapeno. But other like I just don't see it as worth it whenever the food generally tastes the same. Like it doesn't really alter the flavor that much, in my opinion. And I think I could get by without it, to be honest. And so I get it if you want to add spice, you want to add some like, flavor. Like there are some vegetables that do have some level of flavor that are like, okay, I understand that. But for most of them, like, really, do you really need them? I just don't. It doesn't make any sense to me. Just really quickly, do my CTA here. If you like what I'm saying so far and you want to support me, I'd really suggest that you go subscribe and do all the other YouTube stuff, like share and like this video, and make sure you watch to the end. That'd be really beneficial and support me. So yeah, thank you. Let's just keep on going. So the next thing is just the fiber aspect. I kind of talked this a little bit earlier where I was talking about how whenever I would eat broccoli that's a little bit undercooked, I'd just chew and chew and chew on it and chew, and it would make me gag because it was not getting broken down. It was forming this like weird like crap in my mouth, this weird like gel in my mouth, and it was just like bleh. It was awful. It was disgusting. It's just this weird mush, fibrous mush in my mouth that I couldn't break down with my jaws. Like I'm not a cow. I can't just like grind. Like we can't like move our jaws side to side in like a chewing motion like cows can. So we can't really break that stuff down into like good little chunks for us to digest. And it's just gross for me personally whenever I've done that in the past. And another thing that I've learned is that you actually can't digest fiber. Like we as humans literally cannot digest fiber. We cannot digest vegetables. I just think that's insane. So what I've learned is that vegetables and just plants in general, most plants are made out of a material called cellulose, which is like this structure of, I think it's carbohydrates, but it's this like structure of carbohydrates that's built up into like a fiber, right? And you need a specific enzyme in your body in order to break that down so you'll digest it, right? But since we don't have that enzyme, we end up just like it just doesn't get broken down. We can't absorb it. And so it just passes through our digestive system. And just on like a survival basis, for me, I don't think that makes sense. So I get why some people might think fiber is a good thing. I don't think it is, because if it blocks the absorption of other things and you can't digest it, it's a waste product, meaning your body doesn't want it, so it's useless to consume, right? I that's my logic whenever it comes to approaching that, is like, if your body doesn't absorb it, then is it necessary for survival in the first place? And what benefit does it really give? And so people will say, oh, but it allows you to go to the bathroom regularly. But if you eat too much fiber, then you get constipated, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you get stopped up. For me personally, whenever I've eaten more fiber, I've always had more digestive tract issues, more like GI distress. Like, my gut has been more bloated. It's whenever I've eaten more fiber, it's been more uncomfortable, like it's hurt more. It's just not something that I really enjoy particularly. And so I don't see the benefit of having more of that in my life. And so whenever I cut that out completely and that stuff resolved, yes, the regularity of going to the bathroom was less, but it doesn't hurt anymore. And I don't think going to the bathroom should hurt. It's a bodily function. I don't think it should be something that's like ultra painful, especially if it's like something that you do relatively regularly. So yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think if you were eating junk food though, I can see why eating more fiber would help. And that's why so many people point out to like these studies of like, oh, fiber is helpful, fiber is helpful. But you got to think about who's being studied, right? Because if you think about like the average person who doesn't have a ton of fiber, the average person isn't going to be eating, no junk food. I think I'm a little bit separate from, these studies that are studying people who with low fiber intake, because you got to think about what are the ultra processed foods made out of. Ultra processed foods most of the time are made with lower fiber, and they're also a bunch of other garbage in them. And so whenever you add more fiber into those diets of ultra processed stuff, and you add more fiber into that, it's probably going to be beneficial because they're already in such a terrible place. But I'm not eating any junk food whatsoever. So me personally, I don't think it's necessary for me. But if you're eating junk food, and this is kind of like a strategy that I would implement if I were to go back to eating junk food, is I'd probably have some level of fiber beforehand, because like the junk food itself probably isn't going to make me feel great. So I may as well just like double down on stuff not making me feel great. So I may as well eat some vegetables beforehand so that I get a little bit of blockage of the bad stuff before the really bad. Yeah, it gets a blockage of the bad stuff from absorption in my stomach, in my intestines, so I can just like pass it through. I think that's actually intelligent. If you're eating junk food, then you should probably eat vegetables. I think you shouldn't eat either. You shouldn't eat junk food whatsoever, and then you can move on from there. But if you are eating junk food, maybe you should eat more vegetables. Maybe. That's the way I think about it. The next thing, though, is that you don't need them. And so I was talking about how I think I'm kind of a little bit separate from the average person, I guess. I try not to like, I guess, gloat or be arrogant or whatever, but I don't think vegetables are really necessary for me personally. They might be necessary for someone who's eating a bunch of junk food and still needs to learn how to eat clean. Fine. I don't think they're necessary for me because I don't eat any junk food whatsoever. I just eat meat and eggs. Like, that's the only things that I eat now. And so I don't really think that I need vegetables whatsoever to consider myself a healthy person. But beyond that, I've also learned that you don't really get any nutrients from the vegetables that you consume. So like I was saying, like the fiber you can't break down. But inside of the plants, you'll get these people saying, "Oh, but this thing has this vitamin and this mineral." But you got to think like, okay, but if you can't break down the vegetable itself, right? You can't break down it into its constituent parts. Then can you really get the nutrients out of that from the fiber? Probably not. Like if this fiber has a ton of, like I don't know, like magnesium or whatever, right? Has a bunch of like super good minerals in it, but you can't get that out of the plants, then does eating the plant in the first place even make sense? I don't think it does. And another thing that I've learned is that some plants actually have chemicals in them that actually steal nutrients from you. Like they'll go into your system, steal the nutrient, like bind to the nutrient, and then you'll pass it out. So basically, they're just taking the nutrients out of your body, and you're losing nutrients faster than you would be if you were not eating them whatsoever, which I think is nuts. I think that's absolutely insane what kind of chemical warfare they're playing, dude. That's insane. And so that's another reason why I kind of avoid them, is just because, one, they'll steal nutrients. Two, I don't think you can really get all the nutrients you can out of them. Like I'm very, very confident that whenever you eat, I don't know, like broccoli, like you're not getting the protein from that broccoli. You're not getting the nutrition from that broccoli, right? You might get a little bit, sure, okay. I'm sure you get a little bit, but are you getting the nutrition from that thing? I know I am from like meats and eggs and all that stuff, because there isn't a ton of waste products coming out the other end. Does that make sense? Like I know I'm absorbing a majority of the stuff that I'm eating because there's no waste product at the end. And I'm not heavier. Like some people will say like oh, the meat is going to get stuck in your colon and it's going to rot there. Okay, but don't you think you would weigh more at the end of that? Like I don't weigh that much. Like I weigh less. like if you aren't absorbing the nutrients and they're just sitting there, right, with nothing's happening to them besides them rotting, then you should weigh more, right? That's the theory, right? But I can basically promise you that you're not going to weigh that much more. Like, yeah, you'll have the weight of the food as it digests and you start like absorbing it, but after a few days, after you like breathe and you go through your normal cycles and whatnot, your weight is going to be like essentially the same if you're eating the same amount of food. So that's the way I see it. That I don't think you need vegetables whatsoever. I think you get all of the nutrients that you need to survive and thrive from meat and eggs and those sorts of things. And so I don't really need to eat vegetables. And so those are the reasons why I eat absolutely zero vegetables. Sorry, my throat is like starting to dry up. But I think the biggest thing that I want to encourage with this video is not like I don't hate you, or I don't really care if you eat vegetables or you're a vegan or whatever. Like that's cool, right? My goal with this video is to encourage you to experiment with your life. If you feel perfectly fine, if you genuinely believe that you feel perfectly fine eating the way you're eating, okay, cool. My biggest suggestion would just to be eat clean first and foremost. Cut out the junk. That's the biggest thing, right? No more ultra processed food. You don't really need that stuff in your life. But I would also encourage you just to experiment with your diet. Vegetables, no vegetables, high fat, low fat, some carbs, no carbs, whatever. Experiment with it, right? See where you feel best, right? My biggest problem with the current diet space, and I don't know if I'll be the guy who breaks it, but I just want to kind of encourage a little bit less of this like dogmatic viewpoints of thinking like, oh, this is the best thing ever for you. You know, if you find your own little enjoyment, okay, cool, right? Your own little place that you can relate to other people, cool. I just don't like it whenever people are like, "Oh, this is like you're gonna die from this thing," and whatever. And it's just like not encouraging really experimentation and saying like, "Oh, this way sucks. Don't try it ever, ever, ever." Like I don't want to discourage experimentation because I think that's how we get to a place where we enjoy our lives the most is through experimentation of ourselves. So I don't eat vegetables, right? That doesn't mean you don't have to. I'd suggest that you try it out. I really would suggest that you try it out because I think it has benefited me tremendously. If you don't want to do that though, okay, cool. I don't really care. Right? So I just want to encourage a little bit of more unity and just understanding. Like, if someone finds something that works for them, cool. Like, I'm not going to judge a vegan for in like living their best life. Like, if they find that they work fine, okay, cool. Like, I disagree and I think you should try something else. But if you find that works for you, cool. Right? Like, for me, I'm just going to keep experimenting with my life. I'll probably I will eat vegetables at some point in the future again, probably. I'm just going to experiment with my life until I find something that really works for me. And even then I'll probably still continue to experiment with that because I value experimentation over kind of like dogmatic um like sticking to certain things. So yeah. But with that being said, that's all I got for you. So that's why I eat zero vegetables. Again, I would encourage you to experiment, try it out, see if no vegetables would work for you, and then maybe reintroduce certain ones that you really enjoy and just have those. Like my goal with this video is to encourage you to experiment and to not feel compelled to eat your greens because I don't think they'll make you big and strong. I genuinely don't. But like I said, if you enjoy them, cool. But for me, I don't think they will. But yeah, anyways, that's enough yapping. I'll see you in the next one. Be better and have a W day.